Hello, I'm Alex Kronemer. I'm the writer and director of LAMYA'S Poem, and I want to thank the members of the International Animated Film Society for including our film and coming to this screening. I wish I could be there with you, but in this time of COVID, as they say, Zoom is the next best thing. So here we are. Let me tell you a little bit about this film and why I think it's important. At one level, it's a story, a very specific story about a refugee, and sheds light on one of the greatest humanitarian crises of this current century. But more importantly, it's a universal story because all of us at some point in our lives become displaced people, whether it's by choice, in most cases it is, but not always. We leave our homes, sometimes we leave our jobs, we're forced to leave our jobs, we leave people who we love, and sometimes people who love us, who we love, leave us. So all of us do at some point in our life experience a sense of loss, a sense of losing something, of losing our homes, of being displaced. And so in many ways, this is a very universal story, but it does begin in a very specific place. And let me tell you the origins of what that is. Several years ago, in the midst of the worst of the Syrian refugee crisis, I came across an article about a group of Syrian refugees who were reading Rumi in an Athens park. And I was very struck by that. I really couldn't understand it because I knew Rumi mainly to be a poet who always talked about love, who talked about how love is the essence of all things. And I couldn't understand how it was possible that this group of refugees who had gone through this terrible experience, an experience for which love was very little part of, could find anything to inspire them or to even speak to them. So I went back and I started reading a little bit more about Rumi, and to my surprise, I learned that Rumi was also something you could call a refugee. He was a displaced person for most of his childhood, fleeing the Mongol invasion with his family. And that as I learned a little bit more, I discovered that really loss is the starting point of almost all his poems and his and his prose. He begins at that place and takes it to a place of love. Reading further, I discovered maybe the most interesting thing of all, which was that during this time, this young traumatized boy had these terrible dreams of people chasing him, which he always interpreted as people trying to harm him. And his father, who was the leader of the community, got him to understand or to believe that it wasn't people chasing him to harm him. Maybe these were people chasing him because they needed his help. They needed his words. And this was one of the things that inspired him to be a writer. And it just suddenly struck me. I had this image that, was it possible that these very same refugees in this Athens park who needed his poetry so much were among those same people in his dreams, chasing him, asking him to write. And thus was born this story of a 12-year-old Syrian girl fleeing the violence of her country, who's given a book of Rumi's poetry, which becomes a magical gateway where she meets the young Rumi when he was a boy, also a refugee, and helps him to write the poem that 800 years later not only saves her life, but saves her soul. That's the story you're about to see. We did a animation approach in this story that we felt was commensurate with what the seriousness of it. We adopted what we called a painterly style, literally moving watercolor paintings is how was the effect that we were looking for. We also wanted to have a little bit of a rough sense to it, like not nice and neat. So sometimes the colors bleed through the lines and so on and so forth, to give it an immediate feeling, something that would really speak to an audience and help them not be cartoony, in other words, but help them enter this world that we were trying to create. It takes place in three very distinct worlds: Lamya's world, Rumi's world 800 years ago, and a shared fantasy world that they come together in, which has echoes of the real world perils that they're experiencing. So anyway, that's a little bit about it. It was certainly a very powerful experience to have made this film. I hope that you also will enjoy it and feel some of the power and be able to maybe even experience some of the healing for the as the characters do, for the losses that we all experience throughout our lives. Again, thank you very much. Take care and enjoy the show.